dense during the music part, but actually it's much longer than I thought. So more than dancing, I should have prepared a whole musical. Hello, everyone. Thank you for staying for this session, which is the only thing between you and your lunch break. So we promise to make it worthy. My name is José Luis de Vicente. I'm a curator and cultural researcher. I've been working for many years precisely in the intersection that this panel is about, innovation and cultural institutions. And I'm very happy to try to produce a conversation around, I think, what is one of the most important questions that cultural institutions face today, which is how to keep being relevant, how keep having a purpose and how having an impact in society. So I don't want to delay much longer having the really great panelists that are going to join us in this conversation. Eva, Geraldine, Angeliki, please join us on stage. Thank you so much for being here today. So the first word in the title of this panel is a very dear word to anyone working in this space. And I would say that if you have been working in the arts, in culture, in technology, or in design in the 21st century, in the last 26 years, is one of the words that you have used more and heard more. Of course, it's openness. And I would say that open sits at the center of what have been two big movements and two intellectual revolutions of the 21st century. The one was the movement that, in a way, and very much booming in the late 90s, early 2000s, proclaimed that knowledge should be open, that is accessible to everyone, interoperable, that can be integrated through multiple technologies, that it should be manageable. So the open source revolution kickstarted a series of very key movements throughout the last 20 years, from open data to open knowledge, open access. And this had a huge impact in our sector, the GLAM sector. I always love using that word, GLAM, galleries, libraries, archives, and museums, who really much tried to reimagine their function towards this idea, like preserving the heritage that they had to steward, but making it accessible and making it, in a way, compliant with the principles of the open revolution. But in the last, I would say, 10, 15 years, there has been like another narrative around openness rising, which is the one that relates open to meanings like inclusive, accessible, open reaching. And that is very much connected to another, I would say, intellectual revolution, that of cultural rights, the idea that actually that citizens of any nation, and citizens in our case of our union, have a right to culture, which means a right to access, a right to be included within its mission. And we have many movements that are today trying to proclaim this idea of cultural rights and see it at the center. So of course, the cultural institutions of today, I think, face these two notions, how they are open in the sense of preservers and producers of open knowledge and open heritage that is accessible, that is owned by everyone, that can be integrated and can be built on top of, that can be generative, but also how they transition and consider that their first mission is being open as is accessible and inclusive. I think that for all of us working in cultural institutions and organizations in Europe today, this is, I would say, if not our number one priority and obligation, up there in the top three, definitely in every possible sense. So as we are in a way in the middle of a historical transition, the one that, to sum it up very simply and very basically, considers that cultural institutions are, and heritage-based institutions like museums, spaces that preserve memory and identity, to understanding that they are also and mostly laboratories for the future. This is the places in which society can imagine new ways of being together, of thinking and caring about each other. That this idea that we have created these incredible spaces in which we can gather to also imagine other ways of living. We need to think today about how do we exist in this transition. So we are very happy to have with us like three really great voices from our community operating in different dimensions. And the first of them, which I wanted to give first and foremost because she's our host today, of course, is Geraldine. Geraldine David is the General Director of the Royal Museum of Art and History in Brussels, which is for the second edition being the house of the European Bauhaus Festival. She's an economist and an art historian. And her actual mandate as a very, very young director, and actually the first one that was non-interim for a very long time, actually is spearheading a very big process that goes from here until 2030, the next 4 years, when the Cinquantenaire 2030, which is the redevelopment of Belgium's bicentenary mission, also has a very important role to redimension and reimagine what an institution like this one is today and how it serves citizenship. So thanks, Geraldine, first of all, for having us and hosting us. And I would love for you to kind of like situate your vision and your view and that of this institution in this new paradigm of what institutions can be today and how can they think from this position of openness.
Well, thank you, José Luis. Thank you to the NEB. It's the second time, actually, that the museum hosts the new European Bauhaus Festival, and of course, we are extremely happy to have the festival in between these walls. It's also very significant that the festival chose to be hosted in a historical building. Of course, we are located very close to the Commission, but still, as a symbol, I think it's very important. Just a few words about the walls and the museum around you. So the Museums of Art and History is actually one of the oldest in this country. It was founded in 1835 in the spirit of the large 19th century European museum, you know, with a very encyclopedical ambition to have a very large collection that would cover the whole world's human creative history. And it's been here on the Cinquantenaire, the Parc du Cinquantenaire, since the late 19th century. We have a collection of more than 300,000 artifacts covering 10,000 years of human creativity, from the prehistory to the antiquity, to a very large collection of pre-Columbian art, Asian art, and then we also have a very significant collection of European decorative arts. What I first want to say is that, of course, the points and the dimensions, the 2 dimensions that JL mentioned, so the open science part, as well as the openness, the inclusivity side of openness are very, of course, relevant to us. But we really do think here that cultural institutions should not become more open despite of their heritage mission, but precisely because of it. So, of course, our first mission, and you know, museums as this one, were historically temples of knowledge, very closed on themselves, producing knowledge and expertise, that is sure, and that is still part of our mission. But in the future, and now, what also matters is not only what we can produce as knowledge, but also how we can activate it, how we can transmit it, and how we can pass on to the future generations the collection that we preserve. We see openness as 3 key points, I would say, that maybe we will come back upon later in the conversation. The first one, it's a very basic one, but in a place such as this, it's very important. It's actually physical and architectural openness. I think it's a very European challenge because we have to make coexist the life of precious collections such as the one that we preserve here in historical buildings that were not designed to be open to the public and to host museal function. Second dimension of openness is, according to me, intellectual and emotional openness. Showing historical collection and historical objects today is not only about what do we know about this object, but also why do they still matter today, why are they still relevant today, why do they still generate emotions to people when they can see it, touch it, or study them. And then third dimension of openness is a programmatic openness. We are not only, you know, a sequence of exhibitions. We do a lot of things here in the museum. We do research. We have a lot of schools coming. We are a place where we create, where we host contemporary art as well. And I think this is also part of the openness mission of the museum.
Thank you so much, Geraldine. Geraldine was saying before that she doesn't need the slides because the building is the slides. It's like
Yes.
so I would also suggest, I'm gonna pitch it that while you are here doing these 2 days, also you go around and actually know better the house that is hosting you, which I think it's really great. Many things to discuss from where you're starting, but I want to give now the word to Eva Kraus. She's the artistic director of the Wunderkunsthalle in Bonn. She's a designer by training. She has had experience in really great, very important institutions from the Cooper Hewitt in New York to the MAC in Vienna. And her institution, the Wunderkunsthalle, follows a model that I am very personally attached to, which is that of the institution as the place for contemporary debate. That is, not thinking that museums are places where the past is preserved, but places in which the present is contested. It is debated, it is discussed. We were talking before that there is this huge, beautiful European genealogy that includes institutions like the Pompidou in Paris, or the Barbican in London, or the CCCB in Barcelona, that want to be sites for contemporary tensions of the present. And I think the Bundeskunsthalle belongs in that tradition. Their model runs very much in annual thematic cycles. This year was social responsibility, right? And social sustainability. Under the banner, what we have in common, which I think is a very important thing to purge today. What is in an institution like yours that actually has no collection, the way that you approach the banner of openness and the connection with audiences that come from different contexts and considering this space a space which belongs to anyone, really.
Thank you so much. I was hoping to show you our building. Maybe we can put on the slides.
Yes.
The Bundeskunsthalle in Bonn is a place which has been erected as a big building by Gustav Peichel. Helmut Kohl was the initiator of that. And what we have tried to do is that the symbolic building of the, let's say, museums boom in the 1990s is an art and exhibition hall. So it's a big space with actually like an empty box. So it didn't have like an agenda in the very beginning when it opened, but there was a lot of these typical 90s and from the years 2000 shows on cultural history, like the big treasures of international collections. There were like these like big impressionist and expressionist exhibitions which were touring internationally. So what happened when I came and tried to open up the house was that we did an agenda which was much more into like the socio-ecological turn. You see here an exhibition we had done, We Transform on the Future of Building. I showed this first because this is related to the European Bauhaus, and we did collaborate together on that. But why are we doing this at the moment? Because this is something we want to establish as a partnership with the EU Commission, with international organizations and activations. But coming back to our system, what I want to say is that this box, it's 100 by 100 meter. You only see the rooftop, but this is established as an institution which I would like to open up. We have developed a diverse and sensitive program. This is very theoretical, but I try to explain it quickly. It has the 6 Ps. I don't know if you know about it. There's all these like talkings about how to engage with inclusion, integration, different publics. So we have worked on the program, of course. We do a lot of societal questions on democracy, on ecology, on sustainability, on social issues, on different kinds of ideas we had among the curatorship, but also a deliberative process we have established with citizens. We asked them what they're interested in, so there's a lot of societal questions we wanted to raise. And so the 6 strategies we developed is the program, the personnel. We want to explore the public. We want to like work a lot on partnerships. there's a lot also done on our premises to like change the space, open it up, invite people to stay, open the library, bring in a salon, have spaces where you don't have to get a ticket, have access free, live arts, theater, discourse is a big question on our system. And in the end, we have also discussed that the most important, of course, is also the PR, which is the question of nowadays, social media, how to put everything online, how to do interactive panels, how to do participatory events, and so on and so on. So I'm back into the WeTransform because that links it here. WeTransform was very much about the question how to bring in new spaces, how to discuss, of course, the matter of architecture, sustainability, but also to see and look what materiality is about, design is about, how social issues are coming across. This is all what the New European Bauhaus is about. So I very much recommend to have a look also at our archives, because that's important, I think, for this panel also to know that an exhibition hall can choose all kinds of themes. So we don't have collections, we don't have the wonderful heritage of the past, so we try to really kind of reinvent our discussions about the future. Maybe you know that we have a very big head of the UN sitting also in Bonn, so we work together with the UNCCD, the UNFCCC, which have at the moment their COP negotiations in Bonn. So there's a lot of like kind of interaction also with all these like big institutions there. And this is something I'm thinking, this is my agenda to stay relevant as an institution, to pose questions of nowadays society, and that's what we are doing in Bonn. Yeah, that was the last 2 years invitation to the minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. And our final panelist is, we are very honored to have with us Vasiliki Kasiniadou, which is the Deputy Minister for Culture of Cyprus. Cyprus has been, I think, until like last week, the sitting presidency of the Commission for the first 6 months. She's someone that we as cultural professionals actually appreciate a lot, which is someone in charge of cultural policy who comes from cultural practice, because we are very used to actually not having that. She's an archaeologist by training in a country in which archaeology, of course, is a very, very, very important cultural legacy. Your specialty, if I'm not wrong, is archaeometallurgy, like the history of metals and the past history of the technologies of metals, which I think it's, of course, something very interesting to see at the center. And she has directed the Archaeological Research Unit in Cyprus, among many other positions. I would actually, from this perspective, having ended up this semester, would love to take your view also of the moment in which Europe is now regarding its cultural policy vision around these questions, and how do we reimagine like the future, not only of our institutions, but culture as a force for social, economic, and technological change today.
Thank you very much. Actually, our presidency still has 2 weeks to go.
2 weeks to go.
We had a very successful presidency in terms of policy. We managed to reach the partial general approach for Agora EU, which is the funding program that will, for the next 6 years, fund culture, media, and civic society. So we're very pleased that this actually was completed. And also, even perhaps more important, is the joint declaration on the Culture Compass, so the idea of Europe for Culture, Culture for Europe, which will be signed, was agreed and will be signed by the 3 institutions of the European Union, so the Commission, the Parliament, and the Council. This will be signed next week by President von der Leyen, President Metsola, and President Christodoulidis, our president, as part of the council. So Cyprus presidency has put a large focus on culture. We believe that it's our common roots and our common ground. Culture is where we should start on. And of course, the new European Bauhaus is very important and has a lot of common ground between these projects. Accessibility is something that we are working on, and in many ways it's difficult, but it's a challenge, especially when you're working with archaeological sites, monuments that should be accessible and yet are difficult because you still need to preserve their originality and and this is where technology comes in. And we're very happy to be part and have been part immediately on Europeana and Twinit, a new project where you give access to people through digital platforms, and it's something that we're working on. Also, for us in Cyprus, we've been trying to spread out culture, so not only in the center, in the actual cities, but also in the countryside. And also in the last years, we're trying to use culture as a way and means for growth and health and support. For example, last summer we had devastating fires, which also threatened, of course, monuments, but also had a negative effect on the people. So we've been trying through workshops, theaters, music, to help alleviate the problems of this. And the same is true, Cyprus, a large part of the island is still under Turkish occupation. So we have a double role, first of all, to preserve the heritage and memory of the occupied part, and to help the refugees to retain their identity and especially their intangible heritage. So I think culture can be really a tool for all these effects, and I do hope that it will be put on the forefront. Hopefully with our IU, if we have a good funding, and this is the last part that will be discussed at different level. Culture needs a lot of funding, and it can give a lot more back. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope we get a chance to talk more about Europe for Culture and Culture for Europe, which I think is like an important banner and what it's going to mean. Also, thanks for mentioning Europeana, because sometimes in these discussions, this is the hill I will die on. We talk a lot about public cultural infrastructure, and we don't talk so much about public cultural digital infrastructure, which I think is absolutely key today. And the Europeana project, which has been the flagship European initiative, I think it's important to keep within these conversations. Thanks for your initial starting points. We're going to have a very open and I hope loose and free conversation now around things that concern us. And I think that would be something that concerning the two sense, that they have to do with what we do, but also that worry us in the sense that we think we have to think about. And I cannot help thinking that for all of us who believe, who have grown in and who preserve the cultural institution as a social institution, as something that is part of society, in probably the part of the world who has the richest, most diverse, and most established public cultural infrastructure in the world. And I always say that, and I want to have that emphasis. Europe is the global leader in public cultural infrastructure, and I think this is something very important to be aware of. The last 10 years have been very transformative, and in some dimensions also very traumatic. Of course, we are still recovering from the impact of the pandemic, which changed many things. We went through an energy shock and a crisis. We know that shipping valuable objects from one place to another in the world today is harder, more expensive, more costly than ever before, to a point that it's making many institutions to really rethink what is their actual role, how much they actually be spending into putting things into crates and moving them from one pane or another when the costs in some cases are desorbitant. But also the broader question of social relevance and social impact. What is social relevance today in a world in which the scrolling act seems to have been eating up more and more spaces of society? So the main question always is, how do we stay relevant? And in this, how do we stay relevant? What do we preserve? What is core to our mission and thus is valuable and we need to double down on it, and what needs to change, what actually needs to adapt and to kind of like in a way recognize and realize that we live in a different world, to the world of, in many cases in which our institutions were founded, like your institution of course is sitting on 200 years of colonial history, your institution was founded in the 90s, which is a different world to a certain extent. So I wanted to make like a first round around these two things, what to preserve, what to double down, and what to change, what to actually we realize that we need to transcend to stay socially relevant and to return to society what society gives us in the form of public funding, of social relevance and social position.
Do I start?
Of course.
Okay. I think your question comes back again to the theme of this discussion, that is accessibility, again, for us. To me, I was struck when President von der Leyen 2 days ago here said, well, one of the principles of the Bauhaus is, of course, that there is housing for everyone. And, I think this is also a role of the museum, is to be a house of collective memory. It's to offer a house for everyone, but at a societal level, because museums are places, and especially in those digital times when everything moves fast, where we offer continuity and where precisely we can be safe haven. In the physical sense of the term, we offer cooled rooms in the hot and hotter summers for our seniors, but also in a very intimate way as well. For some people, such as I am, museums are a place of ourselves where we know they will always be there, or at least we hope they will always be there, and we know that we can always come back to them. It's the same thing, I think, for archaeological sites or for exhibition spaces. They are places that are open and that we know we can go back to. I also think that we have to preserve the fact that museums or cultural spaces are places where we can have a shared experience. You can come to a cultural space to see pieces, artifacts, artworks with your friends, with people around you, at the opposite of just scrolling alone on your phone. We still offer an experience that can be collective and that can also be very material. We have to show, and we are still, the tenants of the materiality of our world. And I think this is also what we should, preserve in our mission. And then I think, and especially for an institution like this, we're not only a museum open to the public, but we're also a scientific institution. In that sense, we also, play a role in Europeana. We also respond to open science standards, as you mentioned. But this is also something that we have to preserve, because science and scientific mission of a museum like here also allows to have evidence-based facts and policies. And it's also a way of having different voices speaking up, especially in a time where we have more and more fake news, where it's not really easy to disentangle what's fake news and what's real news, especially on the social network. We represent continuity, but also transparency and evidence-based knowledge, I think.
I can add to that, because when I think about relevance of museums and exhibition halls as ours, I really think about education, and it's always education first, I would say. And we think about education that it's like small children doing some artistic workshops and getting the basics of what is culture. But it's not true, because in the end it's all our knowledge production which we want to keep up. And what I mentioned before, what we did is, for example, under the umbrella of the first theme year, we did democracy. There was an exhibition on immigration, which was very important, because still Germany does not correspond to the idea that we are an immigrant city and country. So the second was a big exhibition on Immanuel Kant, and everybody was very happy that you can go to an exhibition where you learn about it. Then we had a lot about feminist voices like Hannah Arendt, Simone de Beauvoir, Susan Sontag. These are all people we all want to learn from again. We had a big year on ecology, which was starting with the question on how to protect land and the earth, I mean the soil, and also about the sea and the water. So these were all arts and science exhibition, but people really like to kind of get into that and understand again what this is all about. This year we do a lot of subjects on social dimensions, on queerness. We have a history of sex work, which is just displayed. And the question is very much how also this lifelong learning and education can happen in an exhibition space, in an institution, how you can like raise awareness, put questions on empowerment, how you can learn from each other, from other people. I'm very happy to go and see exhibitions where I don't know so much about, and it takes you half an hour and it will keep in your mind to just jump into a new subject, and it stays with you, I guess, I hope. So in the end, this is what I always claim for, and people tell me always, oh, this is so intellectual, and you have to have been studying before, and I'm like, I'm not sure, and funny enough, I think there's a lot of changes in the exhibition world at the moment that I always say Publikumsbespaßung. It's something like, you know, some fun for the audience. It's not so much about fun anymore, I think. It's all that, you know, it's about interest, about Neugierde, which is being curious, being alert, trying to understand things. This is also why we did the New European Bauhaus, because it was a lot about the question of climate change, resilience, biodiversity, and so on and so on. And honestly, like also my board, we are a federal governmental exhibition hall, they asked me, why do you do so difficult themes? And the public tells us that they like it, and that's really important to understand that there's a shift, I think, that you don't just want to see beautiful images. Of course, we all love it, but maybe you also want to learn from the institutions.
I would like to go back to what you said about COVID. Actually, some good things came from that horrible experience. Well, for some was not so bad. We stayed home and enjoyed our family and did our work. Actually, a lot of the museums and cultural institutions became much more accessible because of COVID. A lot of museums made virtual tours, which are still available. And I think this was really a shifting point to how, to openness. And I think this is something that started during that period that still continues. And this openness is very important, especially for countries like Cyprus, an island state, which is quite far, is the easternmost border of Europe. You need to take 2 flights sometimes to get to major European countries or elsewhere. So, and this is also important for our cultural industry, the creative industries. They have much more access to show their work through the internet and all the media that are now available, so they can reach a wider audience which they couldn't otherwise. They would need a lot of funding and great cost. So there's some good things that have come out. We need to work more on this openness, and I agree with you that to stay relevant, museums need to be interesting, but they will always be interesting. And even for the younger generation, which are so attached to their mobile phones, if you manage to get them out and to take them to places like this, I think they will be interested, they will leave behind. Maybe when they go back, they will search for more information. They have so much more, they know so much more how to access information now. We need to make sure that the information is right and not rubbish. So I think there is a bright future there. We don't need to be very always pessimistic. We need to be optimistic, take opportunity and see what is available now and how we can put it to good use. And as you said, museums will always be relevant, always be a safe house in a way, a place where you can go and relax and spend some time on your own with a wonderful object, which is needed. Sometimes it's needed to have this peace and quiet of mind.
I would like to think that they're always going to be relevant. I think it's very important as a community that we don't take it for granted, that we actually keep on being aware that we are in a world where we are actually fighting for time, fighting for attention, fighting for resources with many other multiple agents. And I think you have mentioned a couple of things that are very important, which is that there seems to be a central tension today between us institutions, agencies in society. We are places and we are voices. And when do you want to reinforce the idea that you are a place, like you have said, this idea of the climatic shelter, which is more and more one of the things that we seem to be pitching. It's hot in the summer, we are enforced to air condition everything, so come and we will be chill. But there is this idea of shelter, which I think is very valuable, and of still being the third place, that idea that there is home, there is work, and then there is other places. If that distinction matters anymore, now that sometimes there is not even home and work. So being a shelter, but also in the ongoing, unstoppable influx of information, the constant fight for attention, the adrenaline-infused, constant, ongoing messages are being thrown on, preserving a importance for role there, like actually like preserving like a function for you. So in this tension of when are you a physical shelter, a hoster of a place that holds people and holds legacies, but also when remembering that you are a voice in that ongoing influence of information. And as you say, like I can imagine for citizens of Cyprus, having access to the cultural legacy of the whole of Europe is an incredible potentiality of the digital medium. Do you think your institutions are designed for these two functions? And how do we actually move to be able to fulfill those two functions? Because buildings are hard to preserve, and they're very costly, but attention is also very hard to get, very hard to reach. I know these are not easy questions, but this is what we have today. Yeah.
It's a great question, and I think as a museum director, you're always caught on in between these two tensions, in between preserving and, you know, making a collection alive. And as a director of a museum, you have to manage these two tensions. It's a daily trade-off. Are we well equipped for this? That is your question, actually. It's more and more difficult, I think, because we are facing huge challenges. We see the impact of climate changes, for example, here at the museum with global climate change. We have more and more frequent heavy rains in the summer, which have a direct effect on our storage rooms, which impact actually, you know, the materiality of the pieces itself. Of course, we need to find creative solutions to cope with that, but I think there also needs to be a political consciousness that arose for these two tensions. We in Europe, and it's a very European problematic, I think, we have historical buildings, as I said, that host very important collections that allow us to preserve our collective memory or identity. And more we are facing these costs, very costly maintenance of the building, and at the same time, it becomes more and more costly to have collections and to preserve them. There needs to be, I think, a political will to keep that alive and to make our institutions as part of the solution, actually, to climate change, to mental health challenge, because as I said, I think museums as a shelter is very important and relevant. And we have seen it also during the COVID. I mean, as you said, cultural institutions have also been, they were the first to reopen in the public spaces. And they were, at least, well, all around Europe, willing to reopen and to offer also places for discussion at a time where people were just home and afraid of the disease, etc., etc. So we are important economic innovation actors, and we need to, I think, set that on the front stage a bit more.
Eva, in your case, in which you don't have a collection, your shelter can be totally invested in another
Yeah,
sense, no?
we have the shelter. We have not only a shelter, we have a fortress. It's like a huge building block. I said 100 by 100 meter. It's like a fortress. It's like a big institution where we thought inside and outside we have to do and attract a lot of people. And of course, inside you have this third place, as we call it, and but also there's since we are not in the center of a big city, but like at the outskirts of a small town, how to kind of bring people in and how to make them also stay. So we have a huge, wonderful rooftop, and a lot of, we call this program in the summer, for example, interactions. There's a lot of participatory events going on, but also we have like a huge water pavilion of Jeppe Hein, we have like a slide of Carsten Höller, we have a lot of, let's say, playground installations, artworks which kind of you can play with, you can interact, you can, people love it, kids of course, but also the grandparents. So this is something. We have an open library, we have a reading room where you can access all newspaper, we have a media arts lab where you can watch films for free. There's of course restaurants and cafe and places where you can hang out and see art just in the foyer and in spaces where it's not an exhibition, but we try to really engage on different levels and with different events to kind of make sure that the audience is really kept there for spending time and resting and sitting, and we have a beautiful garden, and all these things are important. We always think this is like the luxury plus, but it's not. It's very, very intrinsic to our program to make sure that families, individuals can stay, can even work there. We have co-working spaces, free internet. Of course, this is all obvious for now, but when we think about institutions before Corona, you would just go and go back or have a coffee and go back. So I think this twist of institutions very much that you stay, you get involved, you also participate more, you interact, you have talks, discussions, exchange, also live dialogues and these things. It's getting much more important.
Well, I think also making it relevant by doing different events. For example, in Cyprus, as if I speak from my own experience, always the idea is that museums are for visitors, for tourists, or school children. Once you start doing other events, so musical performances, dance performances, even theatrical performances in the museums, you get different people coming for different reasons. They come for the event, but then they see also the museum. And once they come, you create a different audience. So I think we need to, and it's not easy because also museums are very traditional and a lot of curators are very much in a different mindset. But I think once you start looking in a different way, and also one challenge we face is to convince that culture and culture museums and cultural heritage is part of the economy. And it's true for the whole of Europe. I mean, why do you go to Paris? Why do you go to Barcelona if not to see in Brussels, if not to see the museums and the monuments, the sites in Egypt? So I think this is something that people are missing. They always think that of culture as a burden, but actually it's very much part of the solution. And if we're talking about environment change and climate crisis, also the solution there can be found in the traditional architecture. We were discussing before, as we were going around the places, how traditional architecture is much more adapted to the local climate. Studies that were done on traditional houses in Cyprus found they always have a constant temperature, whether it's winter or summer, because they have the windows are in a way and the walls and everything. Now you have this modern architecture, which is, it could be anywhere and is not adapted to the local climate. So I think in looking into the culture, we may find also solutions to a lot of the problems and issues. And mental health is also one of the main things. I mean, you can find respite in music, in theater, in books, literature, and there's a turn back to books now. People are returning. Libraries can also be a haven. So I think we just need to convince a lot more people that this is part of the solution and not part of the problem.
We have very, very little time, but I want to do 3 fire shot questions, things that are important for me that I think we should mention directly to each of you. Geraldine, the 2 big words, decolonization and restitution. You are in the center of one of those kind of museums that have to deal with these things in an incredibly diverse city, sitting in this imperial legacy. You are looking to this horizon for the next 4 years. What do we do with this?
Well, the museum is on the verge of starting a whole process about decolonization, because when you think of decolonial work in the museum, of course you think about provenance research and restitution, but it's not only about that, right? It's a whole shift as a whole institution with the people who are working in it, but also with the people around it to, drive from the museum still lives upon an imaginary of colonial, actually, and we need to move from that to an environment of more humanistic approach to our collection. But yes, we are in the middle of it. We have several official restitution claims that we are tackling upon. Our minister actually, but this is not about colonial, but yesterday announced that she set in place an administrative frame to cope with the Second World War provenance issue and restitution. So this is a beginning. So as a museum, as museums in Belgium, because it's not existing at the moment, we are also demanding parties for, a clearer administrative and juridic frame upon which we will be able to work. I think Belgium, in that matter, has years and years of is a bit. Not ahead, but behind, actually, its neighbors. So, yes.
Eva, very fast, you have done a full project with Transform that deals very much with the values of the New European Bauhaus. The New European Bauhaus was to be a political and social movement, which in the end means it's a cultural movement. What do you think is our responsibility to translate those values to society, but also this is a big responsibility and a big opportunity. How do we also give culture the political weight that it needs to explain to politicians we are the best way to translating these values into society?
Yeah, I think this idea about the socio-ecological turn comes with what the claim is on the New European Bauhaus with culture. You cannot transform a society without having its culture in mind, using the cultural institutions for it, having the aesthetics not too left behind. All these many issues we faced in this program of New European Bauhaus, but also our exhibition of WeTransform. But because you can only do on this holistic term of also economics to not ignore and so on, to have a very broader view on when you transform our, for example, building building heritage, you have to really bring in all these other issues at the same time. And that is something we were trying to communicate. This is something I think very smart to be. This is not a teaser for Mrs. Lyon, who has been doing this program from the scratch with her team. But I think the new European Bauhaus has this broader view that sociological, ecological things cannot come without aesthetics and culture.
Basiliki, I think you have said before, has been part in a way of your work, that the idea that the climate crisis is also a heritage crisis, in the sense that climate and its impact actually is a threat to our common history, to our identity that heritage represents. Climate, of course, is at the center of the Bauhaus, and actually the idea of what the Bauhaus is here. How do we actually in a way, reimagine and communicate to society that suddenly the role also of cultural institutions becomes much more dramatical, because they have to be also a line of defense, a barrier against a threat that goes to the very heart of ourselves, which is our common history and identity through heritage?
Well, climate change is really, as you mentioned, in every respect, a problem for cultural heritage. High temperatures, in our case, droughts, high temperatures, floods, or fires. So, but this is something that we need to take into account. We need to work and protect the cultural heritage. Also, even things affected through over-tourism. I was in Rome 2 summers ago. It was a nightmare.
That is the problem, actually, that we don't want to discuss so much.
It's a big problem, this a negative effect on the sites as well. So I think there's a lot of challenges that we need to balance, to find a good balance between, so that they are open to the world, open to visits, but also protected. And we have a heavy duty because they survived for thousands of years. Now we need to make sure that they're there for the next thousands of years.
Yeah. You have introduced there an idea, and I think it's a great point to finish, which is that if the transition also involves the green transition decoupling growth from emissions, the cultural transition is going to imply decoupling the cultural sector from the touristic sector, which is a huge, huge question that I think we are not facing probably strong enough.
Yeah.
This will be the topic, I think, of a future conversation that we need to have. Thanks all of you for joining us here today, and thanks for you for staying. The European Bauhaus Festival continues today and tomorrow. Thank you. This has been really a very, very nice chat.
Thank you.
Thank you indeed, José Luis, and of course all the panelists. I will invite you to leave the stage. Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, this concludes this morning program, the morning where we explored resilience, reconstruction, and culture and heritage. This afternoon we will shift towards another big question.